Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in South Florida, it's time for South Florida Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of South Florida Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, Abby Cantor Agency, helping business leaders tell their stories. Today on South Florida Business Radio, we have Lindsay Fried and Alexandra Hartmann with Simply Admissions. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us a little bit about Simply Admissions, who you serving and how do you do it?
Definitely. So I'm from New York originally, and then I went down south to the University of Miami, go Canes, and got a degree in business management. I was doing marketing for hedge funds right outside of school and realized pretty quickly that I hated it. So I ended up doing a complete 180. I got a certificate specifically in independent educational consulting from UC Irvine and started Simply Admissions in 2016. Over the past 5 years, we've helped kids in over 13 states so far. This past year, our students were actually accepted into 118 different colleges in 30 states and received over $8.2 million in merit aid. So we're really happy for their successes. At a certain point, I moved to Atlanta, and even though I'm still serving South Florida kids, I wanted someone on the ground there, and that's where Alexandra comes in, and she has a really different perspective than me. She comes from the other side of the desk and has worked in higher ed for over 10 years. So we're really happy to have her on the team in Fort Lauderdale.
Now, what was kind of the impetus of this? What attracted you to this kind of college admission industry?
Honestly, it was that I kept hearing stories from family friends and, younger siblings and things like that about how confused and overwhelmed they were by the college admissions process. I feel like every year something was changing and it got more complicated. And I just knew that it didn't have to be so overwhelming for families, that, parents and kids didn't have to fight about the 10 plus essays the kids had to write. It could be a calmer experience. They could be introduced to more colleges and things like that. And it was a little bit on a whim that I took my first UC Irvine independent educational consulting class, but I completely fell in love with it after that.
Now, who is the target for this service? Is it the parents of the teens? Is it a parent that has somebody a freshman in high school? Like, at what point do people get engaged with your service?
We work with kids in all grades of high school. The majority of our students are in junior and senior year. Because that's, when the bulk of the work is going to get done. In terms of who the target is, it's both. They both benefit. We work with the family as a whole. Obviously, we're most involved with the students, but the parents are involved, during milestone moments across the process, and they're kept in the loop, of course, and we're just sort of taking the stress off their back. But even though the work is primarily with the student, the parents benefit just as much, I'd say.
Now, when they get to you that late, isn't kind of, in some cases, the die already cast in terms of they don't have time to kind of do more extracurriculars or do more of the things that are needed in order to get in the college they'd like?
So we do work on academic planning and extracurriculars for all 4 years. When students do choose to come to us in freshman or sophomore year, you're exactly right. A lot of our focus is on that academic plan, making sure they're taking advantage of, everything that their school has to offer in terms of APs and career tracks and things like that, career and major exploration and utilizing the extracurricular resume to show those interests. But that being said, some kids, they get a little stressed out if you start talking about college in 9th grade and 10th grade. And that's okay. We're not here to add stress. We're here to take away stress. So senior year is you're right. When they come to us in senior year, there's not much we can do in terms of changing. It's looking at where they're at and making sure they have that balanced college list and helping with essays and things like that. However, there's a ton of things we can still do junior year to make sure they're on the right track. Most kids do not and should not start testing like ACT and SAT testing until their junior year, so we can make sure they're moving forward efficiently with that purpose. We help them figure out their 12th grade classes, and put together a college list. My juniors at the end of the school year have their college list pretty much finalized, more or less. So we're able to do all that earlier and then just dive into essays for senior year. But like I said, the earlier you come, the more we can do, but every student's different, and some are just not ready to talk about college in 9th grade or 10th grade, and that's okay. We'll be here when they are.
Now, when you're working with the student or the student's parents or the combination, is part of your work kind of letting them know that maybe there's more options out there than the 3 colleges that they got their eye on or their one dream school?
Yes, definitely. So that's why I'm really proud of that statistic that our kids got into over 118 different colleges in 30 states and 5 countries, because that's some of those schools the kids had no idea existed before I mentioned them and just completely fell in love. And pre-COVID, I traveled around to schools, all over the world, and Alexandra's, as well as we just visited a couple schools today, in fact, that were brand new to her, and getting her introduced to that, and because that's a big part of our job, is opening families' eyes to the schools that are out there, but also making sure they understand how the financial aid aspect works, if that makes sense. So a lot of families come to us and say, they say, we can't apply to any private schools because that's just not affordable. And that can be the case for some private schools, but many private schools, discount tuition for above 50%. So that sticker price that they're saying is going to be the total cost of attendance is nowhere near the actual price that you'll pay. And some of my kids are going to private schools that, end up being the same price at the end of the day as their local public school. So introducing them to that and going on a school by school basis to make sure it's hitting their needs, not only, academically and socially, but also financially.
Now, has there been a drastic change in college admissions since COVID? Like with a lot of schools going at least somewhat in the hybrid, where it's some online, some in person. Are you seeing any kind of dramatic shift there?
I wouldn't say the hybrid piece or the remote learning piece is causing a shift in admissions. What I would say, though, is the test optional piece is really changing things. The majority of schools were test optional last year, and this year many of those schools are, still being test optional. The California schools are test blind now, the public schools there, so they're not even looking at test scores at all. And that's changing things. It's meaning, that some kids, it makes it more accessible to them. They're just not good test takers. It's making it so they can, everything else that they are strong, they have strong grades, strong extracurriculars, and that's helping them. But I think also we saw this year that for more selective schools, kids thought that, hey, it's test optional. Let's put my application in the pile and see what happens. And that saw, schools seeing like Harvard and Duke, Colgate, seeing, increases in applications. But there's other schools that did not see increases in applications or even decreasing amounts of applications this year. So I think it evens out at the end of the day, even with that.
Now, I know a lot of schools kind of pride themselves on how selective they are. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of rankings and ratings regarding how selective they are. It always bothered me that that's how they're kind of trying to show how great they are by how selective they are. I would much rather see a statistic that shows me how each of their graduates are performing, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year after they graduated from a given college within their institution. Is there any stats that show kind of the outcome of how they did after they left the college that was so difficult to get into?
Yes, definitely. And I love that you bring that up because I am so against selectivity and those those rankings. And I explain to my families why it's all marketing propaganda at the end of the day. There's some schools that really encourage kids to apply, and they make them think that they're number one admit in their eyes, and they give out free applications, they waive the fee waiver. They're doing all that just to be more selective. So it's it's not organic selectivity. And with the US News and World rankings, I always tell my family is like, part of that calculation is how many alums give back. And it's not the amount that the alums give back to the school. It could be like literally 500 alums giving $1 each. And that would be just as much as if, 2 alums gave $20,000 each. And that doesn't affect the kids' day-to-day life in college. So we're always breaking it down and trying to sort of go beyond what the marketing piece of it is. I have my kids go into things like job placement rate, 4-year graduation rate, 6-year graduation rate, how many kids were accepted into grad school if they went that way, med school. So it depends on what the kids' goals are, and that's how we direct the kids to do the research. If they're interested in law school, is the school providing a stat for how many kids got into law school, that type of thing. We also look at like loan default rates for how many kids, if they did have to take out loans, were not able to stay current on their loans after they graduated, presumably because they did not have a job. Because sometimes, colleges, if the stats aren't in their favor, they may or may not be as public with them as we'd like, but we can always figure out ways to make an assumption, make, an educated guess on what those figures actually would be. And that's where the loan default rate comes in.
So now, for the folks in South Florida that have a student that's preparing for college, can you talk a little bit about how they can take advantage of the Bright Futures program?
So Bright Futures is a fantastic program. They have to figure out, really at this point, the most important thing is to keep maintaining that GPA, because you have to hit those GPA requirements for Bright Futures. And then when it's, junior, senior year, that's when we'll start talking about those testing requirements and making sure that they are hitting those ACT and SAT minimums. That's the piece that they, the GPA and the test scores is the piece that they can control. After that, it's really just making sure that you have a balanced amount of in-state public schools on your list. So we're not just, looking at UF and saying, okay, it's UF or bust. But financially, if you need those if that Bright Futures, scholarship is what's going to make it financially possible for you to go to school, we need to put USF in there. We need to put FAU in there. It depends on the kid's stats, but making sure that they have, plenty of in-state options to choose from at the end of the day.
Now, is there any low-hanging fruit that a student can be doing right now to prepare for this better?
To prepare for Bright Futures or just college admissions?
For just college in general.
I would say, it really depends on the student, which is why it's a tough thing to answer. But I would say grades do matter. It may not, I'm not saying a C is going to derail your entire future. I don't want to put more stress on the kids, but I think sometimes it's hard to keep the big picture in mind. And, ninth graders might seem like, like this class doesn't matter. It does. It definitely does. And I would say too, take advantage of extracurriculars, whether they're in your like offered by your school or offered in the community, or, even just things, hobbies that you have to do. I have a kid in South Florida actually that used his quarantine time to become a fantastic baker, and that ended up on his Common App, and he had great success with it. So it doesn't have to be a structured activity. Just knowing your interests and figuring out who you are will benefit you in the college admissions process.
So now, if there's somebody out there that wants to learn more and maybe help their kid, get that edge they need and maybe get rid of some of the stress that they're going through regarding this, kind of getting into college and taking the next steps, is there a website for Simply Admissions?
Yes, simplyadmissions.com is our website, and you can see Alexandra, my background, in more detail there. And we have different, blog posts that I think most families would find helpful about the PSATs and different aspects of the college admission process. And you can also schedule a consultation, a complimentary consultation if you'd like to.
Yeah, and that's simplyadmissionswithan.com.
Correct. Yes.
And then we're talking primarily about South Florida, but you help kids all over the country, right?
Yes, I do. And Alexandra does as well, but she's based in South Florida, so she's able to meet with kids in person in the South Florida area.
Good stuff. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing such important work, and we appreciate you.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on South Florida Business Radio.